Up to 5 years in jail for saying you don't recognize a nation. Does this apply to any other country? Any other country on earth? No. Can you go out there and say you don't recognize Germany as a country? Of course you can. Why would that be a problem? There's just one country, just one, for whom this specific protection applies. The United Kingdom has banned support for Iran's IRGC in our ongoing effort, especially in the United Kingdom, to replace liberal democracy with totalitarianism. They are doing the same thing to it as they did to Palestine Action. It was Palestine Action, right? That was the name of the group, where you can be arrested merely for showing support for an organization. To an American, as an American, I find this absolutely appalling. The idea that merely supporting an organization, not, by the way, with resources, but with your words, can lead to a jail sentence is genuinely unbelievably bad. But I guess, I mean, they don't have the First Amendment over there. So, you know, the Prime Minister announced his government would designate the branch of the Iranian military under a new National Security Act. We love National Security Acts. They always seem to do so much for national security and nothing at all for suppressing the speech of the citizens of the country that's supposed to be secure, enabling law enforcement to take action against anyone deemed to be providing it with support. It was announced alongside similar designations for the Islamic Movement of Companions of the Right, IMCR, which has been blamed for attacks on Jewish targets in the UK, and the Russian GRU Volunteer Corps, an international branch of Russian military intelligence. Anyone acting on behalf of those who threaten our national security should be in no doubt there is no place for you in Britain. Such a sinister, evil fucking thing to say. Threaten our national security. Acting on behalf of, you are not acting on behalf of an organization for saying you support it. That is not what that means. Just fundamentally illiberal. The leaders of the Enlightenment would be disgusted by this. What are you going to do? Democrats would do this if they had the power. I mean, a bunch of like Zionist local Democrats have pushed for anti-BDS laws, which is like basically our version of this. The First Amendment means they can't directly target speech, but they can do whatever they can to, like, you know, suppress your rights adjacent to those rights. Germany's worse. You can't even say Israel isn't a real country, up to a 5-year sentence. Yep. Germany moving to criminalize denial of Israel's existence while refusing to recognize Palestine. Up to 5 years in jail for saying you don't recognize a nation. Does this apply to any other country? Any other country on earth? No. Can you go out there and say you don't recognize Germany as a country? Of course you can. Why would that be a problem? There's just one country, just one, for whom this specific protection applies. They would do this in the United States too if it wasn't for the First Amendment. We will find you and you will face the full force of the law. Shabana Mahmoud, the Home Secretary, said this is the person who said positively that she wants to turn the UK into a panopticon. Iran and Russia are using proxies and thugs to do the dirty work on our shores. I've rapidly designated 3 groups, so those working for them will be tracked down, put behind bars. Again, this is literally just outright totalitarianism. The idea that any outward show of support for a country or organization means you're envoys of that country or organization, which means that you should be arrested. Designating the 3 organizations introduces new criminal offenses for people who support, assist, or receive or benefit from them. If anyone conducts espionage or sabotage on their behalf, they would face a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. Keep in mind, sabotage on their behalf almost certainly includes if people did sabotage of the UK's military-industrial complex or its facilities during a war with Iran. Like, sabotage here, even if you're not doing it on behalf of Iran, if you're doing a protest that impedes the government, that could be considered sabotage. The UK government are also allocating $250 million for the Jewish community's safety. Let me guess, this will not in any way, shape, or form improve the safety of the Jewish community, but will involve a lot of surveillance of the Goyim. I'm just taking a guess. Don't say that. It literally refers to us. You can't say it because you people never know how to temper your statements. Look at this, man. Metropolitan Police will receive £86 million extra to recruit about 300 extra officers to help increase police presence in Jewish neighborhoods and around synagogues, schools, and community centers. Have you ever seen this happen to any other minority group? $250 million specifically to protect, like, minority neighborhoods? Come on. Plenty of mosques have been attacked. Not according to the BBC. It comes after a series of anti-Semitic attacks in London, including the stabbing of 2 men in Golders Green in April. Remember? The stabbing that began with a stabbing of a Muslim man? Remember that? It was 3 men stabbed? Meanwhile, UK police arrest 12 over far-right terror plot targeting major Muslim gathering. Nah. Oh, this is from today? Nah. Nobody ever attacks Muslims in the UK. Nobody ever attacks mosques. I assume this all goes without saying, but I think it's really important to reiterate that literally none of this is about protecting Jews. Jews and Israel and Zionism are just the chosen wedge. It could be any group. The average Jewish person is not in any way, shape, or form receiving any improvement to their life. It's not even about Israel, really. It's just about implementing a surveillance state. The goal is to replace liberal democracy for in the words of Mahmoud, right, a panopticon. They understand democracy is no longer viable going into the future. There is, as they have recognized, a contradiction between the will of capital and the will of democracy, and they have chosen to abandon democracy. So they're choosing literally any culture war issue possible that they can to justify increasing surveillance. They will never, ever, 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 ever do anything that they say is for Israel or Jewish people that does not advance surveillance. Every move they make will be against the left and against democracy, with no exceptions. Never will the UK government say, to protect our Jewish residents, we will now increase freedom of speech. We will now protect right to free expression. It will never happen. Of course, the average Jew in the UK is not living a better life because of any of this. Increased police presence, more government spending on police, does not in any way benefit them. They are not being protected. The goal is not to protect them. Eventually, the additional segmenting will take place, as we saw with Dana Bash on CNN, where the true Zionists, who may or may not be Jewish, will accuse the non-Zionist Jews of being bad Jews, who are, due to their, sympathies, working in line with their enemies. We already did this in America. Jewish Voice for Peace often gets slandered as an anti-Semitic organization. The student campus protests that took place in America sympathizing with the Palestinians had lots of young Jews there, and they were called anti-Semitic organizations. Polanski, the leader of the UK Green Party, is the only Jew running for the PM slot, and he was called anti-Semitic and continues to be called anti-Semitic by the government. Just remember, none of this is about protecting Jews. They are just being cynically invoked. They don't ever fund Jewish community centers or schools or anything, always just more guns and cameras. Of course, yeah, obviously, yeah. Under the draft law in Germany, anyone who publicly denies Israel's right to exist or calls for the state's abolition could face up to 5 years in prison or a fine. Yippee. The proposal would grant Israel a legal protection that Germany does not extend to Palestine. Wow, yippee. The UN has warned German authorities are engaging in the ongoing suppression of Palestine solidarity activism, and they'll drag down all of liberalism with it. All of liberalism with it, everything. Freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, all of it will be dragged down, and you'll be called an anti-Semite if you oppose it. It's essential to oppose this with every fiber of your being, but also to understand that really your enemy here is, I'll go a step further. Obviously, your enemy is not in any way, shape, or form Jewish people or Judaism. Your enemy isn't even really Israel. Israel is just the vassal. Israel is the chosen avatar of capital. It could have been any country. Israel is not essentially the source of these problems. If Israel was completely politically disempowered, but capitalism remained in its current form, the problem would not go away at all. Immediately, the effort would shift to another wedge issue, another culture war talking point, another minority group that can be defended from both a conservative and liberal perspective. Remember, the reason Jews were chosen to be the cynical envoys of this is because Christian evangelicals in America need them for their doomsday prophecy, but Jews are historically marginalized, which means that you can make liberal arguments to defend them, in the typical woke one marginalized community sense. So they're a minority group that works for both sides from different angles, which is why Zionists play to both angles. This doesn't work for, say, Black Americans who enjoy a lot of sympathy from the political left, but basically none from the political right. You would need to find a minority group that can be wedged in both directions. But fundamentally, this isn't about Israel or about Judaism at all. Women have already been used as a double-edged sword in favor of reactionary cause. Transphobia. The average woman is more transpositive than the average man, and the average lesbian woman is more transpositive than the average trans person. Keep that in mind. In real life, just as the average Jew is left-leaning, the average woman, and especially lesbian woman, is pro-trans. However, because women are, you can defend women from two hypocritical angles. One, they're a marginalized group, but two, they're in the rightward tradition, right? Women are pure envoys of sexual purity that must be protected against like sexual degeneracy, you can defend women against trans people from both angles, which is why right-leaning transphobia is just outward bigotry, but the TERFs use the mantle of feminist critique in order to attack trans people to the same end. I think you meant the average lesbian is more trans positive than the average straight woman. Incorrect. What I said was the average lesbian woman is more trans positive than the average trans person, and that is what is true. Yeah, it's worth remembering that unlike the United Kingdom, Germany actually does have guarantees for free speech in its constitution. I believe in its constitution. Maybe it's not like the constitution, but rather just their legal code. So what they're doing right now in Germany is explicitly illegal by their own laws. It's just that they're infinitely cucked. So it doesn't matter. This is likely not to fly under our constitution, is what many experts say. We'll see if it ends up happening anyway. That's why I've always been against hate speech laws. You can twist them in so many ways. Free speech absolutism? I am not a free speech absolutist. It's just that historically hate speech laws have done very little to actually further the protection of minority groups and a lot to give authoritarian political officials infinite leeway to attack people. I just think they're very legally shaky. CENTCOM announced new strikes just a couple minutes ago. Nice. Yep, just 10 minutes ago. CENTCOM has begun launching a third consecutive night of strikes against Iran. A Filipino immigrant is being deported for being pro-Palestine. The immigration judge calls their views repugnant. Phenomenal. Immigration judge ruled that a man's pro-Palestine views mean nothing he says can be believed. A 38-year-old Filipino-American photojournalist and DACA recipient has been held in ICE detention for 9 months over pro-Palestine social media posts and posts opposing U.S. torture of prisoners, according to a member of his legal team attorney Eric Lee. He came to the U.S. in 2001 at age 14 and has no criminal record, but was arrested outside his Texas home in October 2025, the day after he filmed a city council meeting on the ICE detention of a local Palestinian community leader. In denying him relief in March 2026, an immigration judge ruled his politics rendered his testimony unreliable. Democracy really is done. I hope you guys understand that. Writing that, quote, the respondent's worldview is informed by extremist ideology to such extent he no longer has the ability to provide reliable or credible factual statements. This is like a complete abandonment of the rule of law. The idea that a person's political positions essentially mean that they aren't deserving of legal, yeah, it's essentially unpersoning somebody, yeah, purely for his political views. It's against the First Amendment, seriously? Well, yeah, of course. Remember, we're all going to be called terrorists eventually. Terrorism is a largely undefined smear that's used by hegemonic power in order to attack anyone and everything that threatens their interests. This man, according to the government, is a terrorist. He's been held in ICE detention for nearly a year now. For a judge to just straight up say that you can no longer provide testimony because you're pro-Palestinian? Unbelievable. Smoke seen in Bandar Abbas? Wonderful. Oh. Important detail in the new National Security Act. This is in reference to Starmer in the UK. I see the government is to designate the IRGC as an organization under the new National Security State Threats Act 2026. The designation notice has not yet been published, but will be shortly. They are not prescribing the IRGC as a terrorist group. Instead, in the new legislation, they're using language similar to that found in the Terrorism Act 2000. In the new legislation, 1. A person commits an offense if the person A. invites support for or expresses an opinion or belief that is supportive of a designated body and does so for a prohibited purpose. This contrasts with the Terrorism Act 2000, which says, if he invites support for a prescribed organization. This was extended in 2019 with the following language, expresses an opinion or belief that isn't supportive of a prescribed organization. So they're expanding the language for what it counts to support a terrorist group in the United Kingdom. The supportive language was added because it was so difficult to gain successful convictions with the tighter language. How is it defined? Take the statement, the IRGC was successful in hitting all of its targets last night. Is that supportive, even if true? This will used by the Tories or Reform? Dog. Labour is the one putting it through. Labour is doing it. Labour is using it. Labour's been arresting pro-Palestinian protesters who have committed no crime. Sure, the Tories and Reform will use it too. They're all using it. Can we say now that people who said didn't vote for Starmer were right? Wasn't I pretty doomer on Starmer in the beginning? If I remember correctly, I think that when Starmer was coming up, I said that the United Kingdom was headed on the same path no matter what. I think I remember saying that. You were right too early, so shut the fuck up. Yeah. I mean, everyone knew he was a piece of shit centrist. Yeah, I just think it's important to understand. So centrism isn't a real thing. These people, Starmer is an extremist. This is an extreme act of violence against the free speech and political rights of people in the United Kingdom. They're like, it's not centrist at all. Like my argument is that these people aren't merely ineffectual. They are deliberately trying to undermine democracy because they no longer think it is viable. And I think everything Starmer's done has advanced that. Basically, every single thing that he's done in office that pertains to political expression, rights, freedom, surveillance, or journalism has been in favor of the revocation of democracy. Like, with no exceptions. Can you think of a single exception? Every change that has been made, every move proposed, all of them on those grounds have been illiberal, with no exceptions. I can't think of an exception. I mean, how fucking open can you be outside of the Home Secretary dreaming of an AI-powered panopticon? Like, how much more do you need? The goal here is not merely to be Zionists. They do not care. They are just trying to end democracy. I have warned everyone, and I will continue to warn everyone. If I have any prediction for the future, it is this. The West has abandoned liberal democracy. They are no longer interested in it because you have too much of an immediate contradiction between the will of capital and the will of the Democratic majority. The Democratic majority used to enforce some kind of hold on capital. FDR did, for sure. Even through the 1960s and 70s, Nixon, Carter, they had the ability to wrangle U.S. corporate interests for national purposes. Now that is gone. Corporations do literally whatever they want, and no government can stop them. It doesn't matter who gets elected into office. I think the West is changing to a Chinese hybrid government. No, because China controls capital, at least to some extent. Russia is the closest example. A non-state, a state with no growth and no future, propped up entirely by low quality, low labor, like resource exports, where oligarchs can do literally whatever they want while the people just suffer. There's no future in Russia, and there hasn't been for a long time. Starmer's own MPs have been begging him to end the NHS contract with Palantir. It won't happen. It doesn't matter. Capital exerts a force on democracy greater than and more inexorable than gravity exerts a force on all matter. You know, you can push things up a hill, but eventually all potential energy will be exhausted. Yeah, Burnham backtracked on that. Of course he did. He was part of Labor's Friends of Israel. He's made it clear that he aligns himself with capital for well over a decade. Are you ready to see Democrats never criticize Israel ever again? Yeah, I've been reluctant to cover this because at first there was a lot of sensational coverage of it, which irked me, but I acknowledge now that my being irked that it was immature on my part. My desire to cover this information probably should have superseded my desire to distinguish myself from people who were being hyperbolic. There's an ongoing effort, one which seems like it's going to succeed, to further intertwine the Israeli military with the Pentagon in a way that would basically permanently commit us to Israelis' military affairs in the Middle East. A permanent commitment. It's an MIC dream. Now, not only Israel, but America will be involved in a permanent war. Infinite instability that we always have to direct money to address. You may have heard Congress is on track to approve an alarming Pentagon funding bill that would merge U.S. and Israeli R&D, give the Israeli government leverage over critical defense supply chains, access to military secrets, and extra sway over the innumerable members of Congress with a soft spot for the military-industrial complex. But the Trump administration is preparing to tether us to Israel's runaway war machine in an even more dangerous way, establishing U.S. military bases inside Israel, with the evacuation and partial destruction of major bases, including the regional U.S. Army, Navy, and Air Force headquarters in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar, respectively, all fewer than 200 miles from Iran. The Pentagon is exploring safer options further west, including in Israel. Meaning that attacks against Israel or attacks against us, blah-de-blah-de-blah. Bases can be established, bases can be withdrawn. Yes, but do you think that Congress would withdraw a base from Israel? Do you really think that So leave aside Republicans. How many Democrats do you think would be willing to sign on to a bill that would detach us from Israel? We can barely work up the stones to not give them infinite weapons. U.S. counterintelligence sounded the alarm in Mossad spying over the Pentagon over the war in Iran, by the way. Oh yeah, of course. American government has always been fucking saturated with Mossad spies. This is a well-known fact. Mossad might belong to a country that is nominally our ally, but Israeli military intelligence has always treated us like an enemy nation. Because to them, we are. We're not chosen. They're down one spy this week, at least. That's true. Their fruitiest, critical level. In an internal message views by one of the current officials, the level for Israel is critical for internal espionage. The Pentagon declined to comment. The Office for the Director of National Intelligence declined to comment. While it's commonplace for allies and adversaries around the globe to spy on each other, the current and former U.S. officials said Israel's recent efforts have gone well beyond what is typical and expected espionage. The officials did not know if a specific incident triggered the DIA's decision to raise the counterintelligence threat level. From YouTube chat, I can't believe how wrong I was about Israel. I thought it was all just neo-Nazi blood libel. I can't believe it's real. I assume you're baiting, but I want to be clear in case you're not. What the Nazis say about Israel has always been wrong because they've attributed it to an innate characteristic of Jews. In reality, Nazis are envious that they don't rule the perma-war blood pedophile state. Nazis have never had a salient critique of Israel because they are, at best, they view it as aspirational. Like, at the end of the day, Israel is just a subservient entity to the real problem, which is capital. Capital occupies both Israel and America. Do you think the people in Israel are happy? They aren't. The quality of life in Israel is not great and is getting worse. In many respects, it's a deeply underinvested country because so much money in Israel gets siphoned up into their military complex. Capital occupies both our countries. All Nazis want is to be the Israel. A Nazi has never made a salient critique of Israel, not once. I've never seen one. The most they can muster out is that Israel controls the United States, which is just not true, and it's why I've always argued against that. I might say individual politicians are cucked to Israel because that's part of the pantomime they're engaging in, the theater play that we're all on, but in reality, Israel and America, and all other countries, are to varying extents cucked by the same centralized, well, I can't really say it's centralized, partially centralized political and economic entity. Why are the Nazis becoming Israelis? A lot did, especially from Russia. A fuck ton of people in Israel are like Russian far-right ethno-nationalist Jews who moved over because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, they wanted to get the fuck out of town. Makes sense. So they moved over to a new country from which they could pursue their far-right ethno-nationalist ambitions. There are a lot of essentially just Israeli Jewish Nazis. Not just in the sense that their political views overlap, but they literally have sympathies to the Nazi German government. There are entirely Russian-speaking political parties in Israel. Ooh. How you doing, Newsom?
There's been some headlines. I just want to clear this up. Yes or no? Do you consider Israel an apartheid state?
I said that was directional as it relates to what Freeman was arguing about the annexation of the West Bank. So no, but in the context of if his pursuit in the hard and the far right, I align with that concern and that thinking that was expressed very pointedly by Tom Freeman.
Yeah,
so he's like engaging in multiple levels of not saying anything right now.
Potentially on the path to becoming an apartheid state.
I think maybe some sections of the Israeli government, the far right in the Israeli government, might be pursuing a path that will lead to apartheid.
Continue.
My biggest concern, my red flag, is Bibi Netanyahu, period.
Of course, yeah. Fucking Ziocuck, genuinely. Unimaginable deference to a state that hates us. Just infinite, like, backed by capital. I would engage in fucking election fraud to vote for J.D. Vance over Gavin Newsom. Catch me with 40,000 J.D. Vance ballots stuffed into my trousers as I wobble down to the fucking election station. Fuck this guy.
Stop. Mm-hmm. And his opposition to the two-state solution, how he is navigating his own domestic politics as it relates to placating the far right, thus the annexation concerns, how he's influencing events that are now out of our control, and we're not. We haven't even focused much on what's happening in southern Lebanon, issues.
I really wonder, like, how much this rhetoric is going to shift after the oil collapse, because, like, especially right now, it seems like we're hurtling towards a really bad outcome.
There, intended and unintended consequences, the future of Gaza, the Board of Peace, which is about Trump and Witkoff and Jared Kushner getting their peace, if we can discuss that, and what happens to the future of the Middle East. And so, yeah, I've been very critical of him. And I say that as a guy who visited Bibi.
Right after October 7th.
After October 7th, because of the relationship I've had, not only
as the governor of California for some reason,
Jewish community here, but my relationship to the people of Israel. And so I've long supported the state of Israel.
Sure is interesting how the Israeli government has such easy access to, like, every relevant municipal and state level leader in America, Like, town mayors and governors are like, we've all met with Netanyahu. Man, it's like a Middle Eastern country with 10 million people in it. Really? But everyone's out there kissing the damn wall.